Let's take a look at some of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in college football. Now, this list that I have, this is probably going to be a part one to a multiple part thing that I do. This is not a ranking, this is just a list. But to start things off, I have Ohio State with Kyle McCord or Devin Brown, either one, and then pairing them with Marvin Harrison Jr. Last season, Marvin Harrison Jr., he had 77 catches for 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. Remember, he was also a consensus All-American, and his 14 touchdowns were good for fourth in all of the FBS. Now, he didn't win the Blitnikoff, but I think it's fair to say he's probably the best receiver in college football last year, and he's probably going to be the best receiver this year. No disrespect to Jalen Hyatt, I just think Marvin Harrison Jr. was on a different level all of last year. So whoever does win the job here, between Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, they're going to have the best receiver in college football to throw to. And Ryan Day calling plays, and both these quarterbacks are very talented. Like, we can't overlook that and just think, oh, CJ Stroud, he's leaving. Their offense isn't going to be as good. Because when Justin Fields left after 2020, Stroud stepped in, and Ohio State had one of the best passing attacks in all of the FBS these past 2 seasons. So I feel pretty confident in saying that Kyle McCord, given he's probably the favorite to start, pairing him with Marvin Harrison Jr., that could be top 5, top 10 duo in the country. Next on the list, I have Washington with Michael Penix Jr. and Rome Odunze. Probably the most underrated duo, regardless of position. Two of the most underrated players in college football. Michael Penix last year, he led the Pac-12 in passing, and he was second in the entire country in terms of passing yards. He threw for over 4,000 yards along with 31 passing touchdowns to 8 interceptions. And then Rome Odunze, like I said, he's probably the most underrated wide receiver. He's finally starting to get that recognition. I see a lot of lists out there. I know PFF, they do their rankings, like best receivers, best running backs, best quarterbacks. And Odunze was right up there for best receivers for 2023, according to the PFF grade. I don't know how much you guys pay attention to that, but it does hold some weight, given when you turn on the tape and you look at his stats. I mean, he had over 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. And they also had McMillan on the outside, too. So this was like a 1-2 punch, just like Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka were last year for Ohio State. That's very similar for Washington. And I think this is going to be right up there, probably the best statistical duo in the country. They might not have like the best team success like Ohio State could, but these two probably going to have the most passing yards and receiving yards out of anyone on the list. Very talented duo, and I'm excited to watch what Washington does this year. Kalen DeBoer, very successful first year, 10-2 in the regular season, ending with a bowl game win, finishing 11-2, very successful headed into next year. Next up at number 3, we got Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning battling out for the quarterback spot, and then you pair one of them with Xavier Worthy. I think that could be a very good duo. We saw glimpses of Quinn Ewers and Xavier Worthy last season. But Quinn, he was playing with an injury, and no one really knows how much that was affecting him. It definitely was affecting him to some extent ever since that Alabama game, because before he got injured against Alabama, he was lights out, playing like the number 1 recruit, like he was coming out of high school. And he's got all the tools. Last season, he threw for over 2,000 yards and 15 touchdowns in limited games. He only had 6 interceptions, too, which is very good. The only concern is he had a very low completion percentage at 58%, which is the lowest among all the quarterbacks on this list. But Xavier Worthy, he had a drop-off in production as well in 2022 from where he was in 2021. Remember, he bursted onto the scene as a true freshman. Really showed out in the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma. First play of the game, took it to the house, put his name out there. All the spotlight was on him. And then he had a slight drop-off last season. He had a couple of huge drops in the Alamo Bowl against Washington. That might have costed Texas the game. Nonetheless, he still had nearly 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. He's definitely due for a big 2023, and he definitely has the ability to do so. Next up, I got Jordan Travis and Johnny Wilson at Florida State. Jordan Travis, he was one of the most improved players in 2022. He threw for 3,200 yards, 24 touchdowns, and just 5 interceptions. He also ran for 400 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. Johnny Wilson also had a very improved season last year after transferring from Arizona State. He had 43 catches for 900 yards and 5 touchdowns. But the crazy thing is, he averaged 21 yards per catch, which led the ACC, and that was second in the FBS. Florida State, this is a program that's on the rise, and I think they're going to be the team that arrives in 2023. And they have a chance to dethrone Clemson, win the ACC, and go to the playoff. Mike Norvell, he's doing a great job in the portal. And then you have a guy like Jordan Travis at quarterback, and then Johnny Wilson on the outside. Two alphas in the conference. Like, this could be one of the best duos. Just like I said earlier in the segment, regardless of position, you have two of the best players in college football on your team. Because Johnny Wilson's a guy you can't leave one-on-one. He's tall. He's athletic. People his size aren't supposed to run like he does. Yeah, drops can be a problem, but when he's on, he's on. Like, when he's having a good game, he's pretty much unstoppable, just like the Louisville game last year for Florida State. That's why I'm very high on this duo headed into next season. Next up, I got Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. They play for Oregon. Last season, Bo Nix, he was finally unleashed and showed his skills we all knew he had. It's just we hadn't seen him yet. He threw for 3,600 yards, 29 passing touchdowns on a crazy 72% completion percentage. All of those are career highs for him. He also ran for 500 yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. Bo Nix, I mean, there's a point last season, probably headed into the last month, when he was a Heisman candidate. Like, he was playing some of the best football we've seen out of a quarterback on the West Coast. And I think he had like 42 total touchdowns, or like 40 total touchdowns at one point in the season, and the next closest was like 30. Like, he was playing very well last year before he got injured. Yes, Oregon, they lost Kenny Dillingham. He's the head coach at Arizona State now, but they brought in Will Stein. I think that's going to be a very good pairing, giving Bo Nix a guy that likes to pass the ball. Will Stein's a very good quarterbacks coach. Just look at Frank Harris at UTSA last year. UTSA was very proficient in their passing game. I think Bo Nix is going to have just as good of a season coming in next year, and a big part of that is having Troy Franklin. Troy, he was a breakout player in the Pac-12 last year. He had 62 catches for nearly 900 yards and 9 touchdowns. He's a former 5-star recruit, and in 2021 under Mario Cristobal, you just couldn't see that ability. Oregon, they weren't a team to throw the ball over the yard. A lot of running. You kind of fell down the depth chart just a little bit. But once Dan Lanning and company, they got on campus, they saw the talent, got him on the field, and what do you know, he had a breakout season. I expect a big season from him. Probably going to go over 1,000 yards, probably 10-plus touchdowns for him. Great weapon for Bo Nix to have. And for the last duo on the list, I have Jaden Daniels and Malik Nabers. They play for LSU under Brian Kelly. Last season, Jaden Daniels, he threw for nearly 3,000 yards and 17 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. He also ran for 900 yards and 11 rushing touchdowns. Malik Nabers, he had a big-time breakout year last year. He had 72 catches for over 1,000 yards, but he only had 3 touchdowns. And that's part of the reason why I put them on this list. Because I think Malik Nabers is going to have that production. He's going to have the catches. He's going to have the yards. But I think Jaden Daniels and him, they're going to be forming some type of chemistry here. You know, Kayshon Boutte, he's gone. He's going to the NFL. So it's time for a new wide receiver 1 in Baton Rouge. I think Malik Nabers is going to be that guy. I think Jaden Daniels is a dark horse for the Heisman. Just like Florida State, LSU, very good season last year. Matter of fact, they play each other in week 1 next year. And that quarterback battle, that's going to be fantastic. I think the winner of that game between Jordan Travis and Jaden Daniels, the winner of that game is going to have a real good shot at being in the Heisman discussion as the season goes on. Now, if that's LSU, that means Jaden Daniels is going to be right there. And having a guy like Malik Nabers is only going to help his case to win the Heisman and possibly put LSU in contention to get to the playoff, win the SEC West again. Probably going to have to play Georgia, but nonetheless, put them in a position to do so.